On the outskirts of Ghana's biggest city sits a smoldering wasteland. A slum carved into the banks of the Korle Lagoon, one of the most polluted bodies of water on Earth. The locals call it Sodom and Gomorrah. A group of my graduate journalism students from the University of British Columbia have come as part of a global investigation. We're tracking a shadowy industry that's causing big problems here and around the world. Our guide turned out to be a 13-year-old boy named Alex. He says this is the kind of place where kids grow up fast.
How many people sleep there?
30 people sleep there.
He offers to take us along on a short walk to work, across the Dead River, to a notorious area called Argbobloshi.
You smell.
What does it smell like?
Here. You see? You smell.
The smell comes from the burning of plastic from old computers and TVs. In the last few years, Argbobloshi has become one of the world's digital dumping grounds, where the West's electronic waste, or e-waste, piles up, hundreds of millions of tons of it each year. The boys scavenge a living from the metal remains.
Look at this. Can't even find the words to describe it. There's no future.
Mike Anane is a local journalist who's been writing about the boys at this e-waste dump.
Life is really difficult, because they eat here surrounded by e-waste, so much burning, a lot of toxic substances, and they basically are here to earn a living. But you can imagine the health implications of having to work here for these children whose bodies are still growing up.
Some of the boys burn old foam on top of computers to melt away the plastic, leaving behind scraps of copper and iron they can collect to sell. The younger boys use magnets from old speakers to gather up the smaller pieces left behind at the burn site.
So your specialty is magnets?
Even when the boys take a break, they're surrounded by this stuff. Anane says he also used to play soccer here when he was a kid, but that was when this was pristine wetland. Since then, he's become one of the country's leading environmental journalists.
I'm trying to get some ownership labels. I'm collecting them because you need them as evidence. You need to tell the world where these things are coming from, and you've got to prove it. I believe in proving it.
Yeah.
I believe in documentation. You have to prove it. Now, just look at this.
What's that?
School District of Philadelphia.
Most Americans have no idea their cast-off electronics are being shipped to the other side of the world. When containers of old computers first began arriving in West Africa a few years ago, Ghanaians welcomed what they thought were donations to help bridge the digital divide. But soon a whole shadow economy sprung up around the shipments. Exporters learned to exploit the loopholes by labeling junk computers donations, leaving men like Godson to sort it out.
Yeah. This is where we kept our goods.
He bought this container from one of the shippers and moved it to this lot near the port.
Tell me about this stuff. Where's it from?
Some are from Germany and UK, and also America.
All the way from America, wow.
He sorts through them, looking for working electronics that can be sold.
Tell me about how much works roughly when you get stuff like what's the percentage?
Maybe 50-50. Yeah, it's 50-50.
After it's sorted, a lot of this will be dumped at the burn site outside of town. Hard drives that can be salvaged are displayed at these open-air markets, a benefit for those who can't afford new equipment. But there's a hidden danger. Many of these drives still contain the personal data of the original owners. Off-camera, Ghanaians admit to us that organized criminals sometimes comb through these drives for personal information to use in scams. So we decided to buy some hard drives of our own to see what's on them, secretly filming the transaction to avoid the seller's suspicions.
How much if I wanted to get one of those?
350.
350?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
You don't spend too much.
My students take the hard drives to Regent University in the Ghanaian capital and ask computer scientist Enoch Kwesi Messiah to help us read them.
Will we be able to see the information on the drive?
Yes.
From just hooking all that up?
Yes, sir.
Just as simple as
Yes,
that?
sir.
Within minutes, he shows us intimate details of people's lives, files left behind by the hard drive's original owners.
Wow.
And we find private financial data too, credit card numbers, account information, records of online transactions the original owners may not have realized were even there.
Yeah, I can get your bank numbers and I retrieve all your money from your accounts.
How does that happen?
It happens through, let's say, backup on the drive. In case you lost your card and I have the number, I can just log into the ATM card and then get every information about you.
So basically you could see anybody's files?
Anybody's file. If ever somebody gets your hard drive, he can get every information about you from the drive. Every information. No matter where it is hidden.
That's particularly a problem in a place like Ghana, which is listed by the U.S. State Department as one of the top sources of cybercrime in the world. And it's not just individuals who are exposed.
Here's one with a $22 million government contract.
After leaving Ghana, the students and I analyzed the drives. We're surprised at what we found when we looked a little deeper.
Authorized for local reproduction, so clearly they don't want this out.
It turns out this drive came from Northrop Grumman, one of America's largest military contractors, and it contains details about sensitive, multi-million-dollar U.S. government contracts.
Here's one with Pentagon, right?
We find contracts with the Defense Intelligence Agency, NASA, even Homeland Security. We show the drives to James Jury, who works on data security for the FBI. He's particularly concerned about the potential breach at the Transportation Security Administration.
The government contracting process is supposed to be confidential. If I know how you're hiring people for security-related jobs, TSA, air marshals, then I can prepare a person to fit that model and then get my guy in. And once I have my guy in, you have no security.
Dury says that companies like Northrop Grumman may believe they've successfully erased their drives before recycling. But then he shows us the only surefire way to keep the data out of the wrong hands.
And you just start banging on it with stuff. My mind. There you go. I'm guessing after that it's not going to spin up.
Northrop Grumman refused to speak with us on camera. But they did issue a statement saying the potential security threat was disconcerting, and they pledged to investigate.
Why don't we go in the front door?
We should go in the front.
Right now, there are no tough U.S. laws regulating the disposal of e-waste, leaving companies and consumers to sort out the claims of recyclers on their own.
Can we bother you 2 secs? We have a couple of monitors we want to get rid of.
We wanted to follow the recycling process ourselves, so wearing a hidden camera, the students drop off some e-waste at this facility on the West Coast. We're sure the e-waste will be disposed of safely and locally.
And what they literally do is they dump it into a blast furnace, and it burns it all up, and all they get out of it is a bunch of ash and some of the precious metals. That's all that's left. Everything else gets consumed, burnt. And that's an actual fact.
We take note of the ID numbers on the containers, and using public records, we trace where they're sent. A few weeks later, our reporting lands us here, in the port of Hong Kong. We see for ourselves how hundreds of millions of tons of our old electronics are slipped out of North America into the world's biggest shadow market for e-waste. Just a few miles from the port, hidden behind 8-foot-high corrugated walls, we see mountains of computer monitors, printer cartridges from Georgia, relics of old video arcades. In China, e-waste has become big business. We make our way to the southern Chinese city of Guiyu. It's completely built around the e-waste trade. Miles and miles and miles of nothing but old electronics. Virtually everyone we saw in Guiyu was either hauling electronics or dismantling them. Hello. How are you? Can you ask them, is it difficult work?
像这样的话也是要自己做工，光靠工人做的话就没办法做了。
Guiyu is the dirty little secret of the high-tech industry, really. Even the workers, they have no idea of the long-term impacts to their children. They don't realize what's really happening to their health. They're starting to...
Jim Puckett is an environmental activist credited with discovering this harmful e-waste route to China.
Every time I put my hand down in, I pull up another piece of computer. Unbelievable.
This video, shot in 2001, was the first anyone had documented of Western computers being dumped in Guiyu. He found tens of thousands of people working here in the toxic trade.
I'm not sure what these components are.
We invited Puckett to join us on our visit to Guiyu this year, and he says it's only gotten worse.
I was there first in 2001, and it was shocking enough then. It had gone from very bad to really horrific. And what is happening there is rather apocalyptic. Behind these chimneys are the burn stations, all retrofitted. I smell the solder here. Let's get out.
One of the most disturbing things Puck shows us is taking place behind closed doors. Women literally cooking circuit boards to salvage the computer chips, which have trace amounts of gold. They're slowly poisoning themselves with lead fumes.
So all these old motherboards and other types of circuit boards are being cooked day in and day out, mostly by women, sitting there breathing the lead tin solders. It's just quite devastating.
We wanted to know who's making money off this hazardous work. And that brought us to downtown Hong Kong, home to hundreds of companies that import e-waste into China. No one here would speak to us on camera, so we filmed surreptitiously. Jim Puckett and I arranged to meet one e-waste broker who was willing to explain the e-waste trade from the inside.
Oh, you're hard to find. But you've never had any trouble with customs bringing it across federal trucks?
The man explains how American e-waste makes its way into China, despite laws intended to stop it.
If we were to send you our material, would our recyclers get in trouble with the Chinese government if they find their material coming into mainland?
Okay, I can only say that if they get caught, there's nothing to do with you. Because I buy from you, and then I sell to him. He's buying from me, he's not buying from me.
The man says since Hong Kong ships millions of containers to the U.S., and most return empty, it's cheap to load them with e-waste, and too expensive to dispose of the waste safely, no matter what recyclers claim.
due diligence and checking how environmentally safe it is.
I can only say one thing. If you want to do it environmentally, you have to pay. They have to invest in machinery, everything, labor. And it didn't worth to pay so much money.
But is it hurting the environment?
It's hurting.
It's hurting.
Actually, it's hurting. But they are limited to a certain place. And you have to think about it in this way. China is a developing country. They have to go through this process. And sometimes you have to sacrifice something in order to get something.
What we just witnessed was a typical broker. We kept asking him, but isn't it illegal to take it to China? And he said, that's not for you to worry about. He was very respectful of what he knows about Hong Kong law. He said, no, I can't take CRTs. I can't take batteries. And when I asked him, what should we do with the CRTs? He said, take them to Vietnam.
Vietnam, Malaysia, Pakistan. The list of digital dumping grounds keeps growing. But we heard that one of the biggest importers of e-waste from the West is now trying to change. So a team of my graduate students made one last trip to India. No longer just a dumping ground, India is now generating its own e-waste at an alarming rate, thanks to a growing middle class with a taste for high tech.
Last year, we sold more than 7 million PCs in India. We generated 330,000 tons of electronic waste within India. So all these are going to come back to the waste stream sooner or later. So it's a growing industry.
This state-of-the-art facility outside Bangalore has been opened up by a businessman named Rohan Gupta. He's betting on a new Indian law that could force the high-tech industry here to recycle responsibly, and maybe one day put the digital dumps out of business.
Yes, we have solutions. We could put up such plants across the world. So those are the solutions. 10 years down the line, it could be worth $1 billion industry.
He says one recycled bit at a time, the profits might really begin to add up. At this nearby plant, they're literally trying to spin the waste into gold. Refining the scrap in a safe environment and fashioning it into watches and jewelry they market as eco-friendly. Plants like this could become part of a global network of certified e-waste recyclers that Jim Puckett's group is trying to get off the ground. But even Puckett realizes it's an uphill struggle.
Even if you have a state-of-the-art facility in a country like India, the free market there will send it to the lowest common denominator, to the worst facilities, where people are sitting on the streets just picking through it by hand. It's a myth to think that you can just solve the problem immediately with technology alone.
Before leaving India, the students find some telltale signs of back-alley e-waste work. A trail of stripped circuit boards. Which brings us to this locked courtyard. Inside, the toxic trade continues.
काम करने का मन नहीं करता ऐसा बस नहीं करेंगे तो पैसा नहीं मिलेगा इसलिए करते हैं.
India may have banned these sulfuric acid baths, but it's hard to enforce. And for this 19-year-old and countless others around the world, the economics of e-waste won't be easily changed.
Do his parents know what he's doing now?
आपके मम्मी पापा को पता है कि आप यहाँ काम कर रहे हैं?
नहीं.
क्यों?
मैं बताया नहीं कि इस लाइन में काम करता हूँ. ऐसे मैं अपनी जिंदगी बर्बाद कर रहा हूँ, लेकिन मैं अपने बच्चों को थोड़ा जिंदगी बर्बाद करूँगा.